if anyone does have any questions throughout this, please do just kind of wait. I've got a presentation to go through, of which I'll kind of take you through a live demonstration as well. So we can do that. As I say, it's being recorded, so if you want to turn off the cameras, feel free. If you want to keep cameras on, no worries whatsoever. I'm going to be sharing my screen anyway, so hopefully that will be the focus of everything. So let's get this show on the road. Fantastic. So you can see my presentation now. So thanks for joining this session. So this session is to give you a little bit of insight into social value. So who am I and why am I here? So I'm Olivia Sutcliffe. I'm an associate here at Savills. I sit within something called the Savills Earth Division. So Savills Earth Division is a sustainability consulting division. We've got over 250 experts in sustainability around the world. And I'm one of the social value experts that sit within our London office. The reason I'm here to speak to you today, particularly, is because I'm a procurement specialist. So my previous role was at the Greater London Authority as a responsible procurement manager. And before that, my other role was supporting multiple public and private sector organisations of embedding social value, especially measurement, of which procurement was one of the main drivers for a lot of organisations. I've also programme managed the Transport for London's 10% social value rollout, so impacting their £7.9 billion annual procurement spend. And through that, I had the pleasure of training 300 procurement managers in person. And then just a little bit about me as well. I'm also founder and chair of a free networking group called Young Professionals in Social Value. So why am I particularly here as Savills speaking to yourselves as VCSEs today? So we're delivering a social value commission. So this slide's about Eccles, but we're also delivering the same commission in both Pendleton and in Swinton as well. So our mission objective is to create a priorities-based social value framework for both Eccles, Swinton and Pendleton that will enable regeneration to support the residents, communities and businesses. So it's kind of on 5 milestones, as you can see on the slide here. So we started back in project inception back in July, and we have been doing a local needs and opportunities assessment. We deliver consultation and engagement, which quite a few Salford-based organisations and VCSEs were engaged with through us collaborating with Salford CVS, who are hosting this session. And all that great insight came into our priorities-based social value framework, which is actually now a guide, which essentially will take an organisation through understanding what the local community is and actually how social value can be effectively delivered and reported on. And then I've delivered final presentations both to ward councils and to officers, and a final report is going to be produced. So our deliverables for this, which will all be publicly accessible, was the local needs and opportunities assessment. We delivered community engagement, the priorities-based report framework for each of the different towns, and then also a final report. But the box on the right here sets the tone perfectly for what we're to speak about today. So I'm here to speak about actually social value. So how can you, especially when you're bidding for work with the Salford City Council, how can you deliver social value through that? So actually throughout this bid process, I had 15% weighting for social value, and I committed to over 40 hours of upskilling for Salford VCSEs and MSMEs, of which this is right now, on social value in the TOMs alongside other various social value. So in this workshop, I'm going to take you through kind of what is social value and where has it come from? How is social value measured? And then how can you articulate your social value with a particular look through a lens of bidding and bidding for work at Salford City Council? So what actually is social value and impact within Salford? So the council defines it as involving looking beyond decisions based on financial cost and instead at the wider benefit to a community. Improving opportunities for residents, communities and businesses is at the heart of what the council do. So they want to ensure that the shared Salford way and the city mayor has political responsibility for social value and impact, and that officers from all directorates are coming together to maximise opportunities for communities. So the council policy aims to return a social return from its investment by securing social value from doing responsible business and being a good employer, regeneration, housing and planning activities, business and economic growth / skills and work activity, internal providers, mutuals and joint venture partnerships, and also applying Salford City Council's new procurement strategy, which aims at maximising social value. New procedures and processes for acquiring social value in construction and goods and services, ensuring that new developments are bringing in public benefit, i.e., affordable housing and public realm, and also developing the City Mayor's Employment Standards Charter so that social value and equalities are included. So this is kind of the main ambition, the drive for why the authority are asking for it. And it mentioned there about their procurement strategy. So they released their sustainable procurement strategy back in 2023. So social value is a key driver of that. And for all tenders, social value will be weighted at a 15% scoring criteria. So what this means is when you go to compete for a piece of work for Salford City Council, say to deliver a project or a commission, you'll be asked for your price, your quality, and your social value. So that is now 15% of the scoring marks will be asked for social value with what you do. There have already been significant efforts to deliver social value because despite the published updated strategy being released in 2023, Salford City Council have been asking suppliers to deliver Salford social value for a long time, and they actually delivered their latest impact report. So this is a little screenshot from it here on the right hand side here. So you can see that actually they've had some fantastic work, things such as £230 million total spend with all third-party suppliers, but also things such as 60% of the workforce are Salford residents and 100% are paid the ruling wage. But what we're thinking about right now is this orange box here. So from contracts let by SVP, which stands for Social Value Portal, which I'll take us into more information throughout this process, suppliers have delivered 31 apprenticeships, 17 local jobs, and 59 volunteering hours, which equates to £1.5 million worth of additional social value. So what I'm here to take you through today's session is what is social value, what is Social Value Portal, and how can you help be contribution to these numbers, and how do they end up with that £1.5 million figure? The reason that I got commissioned to deliver my contract was because of the social value and planning requirement. So Salford City Council really is an innovator, and I'll come on to what that means in a minute, but they really are an innovator leading the way when it comes to local authorities and their approach to social value. So they were one of the first authorities that for all major developments, they require a social value statement to be submitted at planning application stage. So this has to go above and beyond any legal contractual requirements such as Section 106 requirements. They have to demonstrate how they're going to go above and beyond and how a developer can understand the community, local needs, how they can commit to doing to best make a positive change that relates to these needs. And they need to provide a delivery plan of those commitments with quantified targets and a baseline for monitoring, delivering, reporting and sharing successes. So they really are a leader in the way, which is so fantastic to see. And that's exactly why I did my commission, to help ensure that developers and investors and organisations can start on that journey of understanding local needs and identifying some of the opportunities that can be delivered through social value. However, as BCSEs operating in Salford, I'm well aware that you know what the local needs that you're addressing, and you're responding and reactively being able to provide that care and support every single week. So I just want to bring on to something called the PA23. So PA23 stands for Procurement Act. And the reason it says 23 is because the legislation was passed in 2023, got royal assent then. So what is it? It's essentially the new legislation for how authorities and public sector bodies need to undertake procurement. So that's the act of buying goods, works or services. So it's designed to deliver value for money, maximise public benefit, increase transparency and improve integrity. It's going to happen. It's going to go, well, it did go live. For once, the government, we actually got live, or when we were meant to. Well, it was delayed from October, but this is the second date and it went live. On the 24th of February, it all went live. And the reason that the Procurement Act is required is essentially to replace existing European Union legislation. So we've been using original thresholds and legislation from EU. Obviously, however, everything in the political land shift that's happened within the UK, that's why we have created PA23. So it's going to benefit businesses because it's more simplified and flexible tender process. There's increased pipeline visibility. So for yourselves, actually, you can see 18 months prior pipeline of what Salford City Council are going to be procuring. Greater market engagement, so the council are encouraged to be able to do more, engage it early. Consistent feedback. We know sometimes you put a lot of effort into bidding, but you don't always get feedback back. So consistent feedback will be required from authorities. Deeper insights into competitors. So you'll be able to see if you didn't win, who won, and what was it you lost out on. And then also delivering the government's national and local objectives. The one thing about transparency, but also for yourselves as an organisation, which might be beneficial, is actually there is now a central digitalised platform. So these shared slides will be shared with all attendees, but here is a live link to the government platform of which you will be able to see actually what are all the different tenders available. So you can't just look just at Salford, you can look at Greater Manchester, you could look at Transport for Greater Manchester as well. You can look at all the different authorities or all the different contracts that align to the services and offerings that you can provide, which is a really good way of opening opportunities to yourself. So to get us started on what actually is social value, all the fun stuff. So usually this is where I do an exercise, but because we're recording it, I won't do the exercise. But essentially, you can take a minute now to think about how would you personally define social value. So I'll leave it a couple of seconds just to have a think. How would you define social value? Hopefully you've come up with an answer. And I can tell you whatever you said is correct. And the reason I say that is there's no set definition for social value. So many organisations, both public, private and third sector, use their own definitions of what social value is. So that can be seen as a positive. But the main thing about social value that's really important is about ensuring positive change is delivered for local communities, and it drives organisations to go above and beyond just profit. So the idea of, say, doing good is good business. So organisations are now prioritising that S over the ESG terms, which I'll talk about in a bit, as it grows importance for winning work, i.e. here in this example, if you are trying to win work for Salford City Council, 15% of your marks are on social value. And also keeping staff happy or even attracting the new generation of talent, as a third, 3/4 of Gen Zs and millennials actually would like to see work for a company that has a social impact purpose or aligns with that. So it's really important actually about keeping staff happy, retaining excellent talent you've got, but also attracting the new fantastic talent in the future and winning more work. And that's even before just doing good. So there's lots of different reasons, but you see here a couple of examples. So Bouygues UK, a construction organisation, they define it as any activity that enhances people's lives and the communities that they work within. Whereas if you look at Social Value Collective here, this is actually an organisational group of professionals based in Australia. So we're looking at the other side of the world right now. Social value is the net impact an organisation or activity makes on the well-being of people and planet now and in the future. So there's no right, there's no wrong, but it's all about aligning to local needs and supporting the communities and going above and beyond. And that's really important. Above and beyond for social value is that additionality. So introducing the S of ESG, as I kind of coined the term earlier, you might be aware of ESG, but if not, it stands for environmental social governance. So environmental social governance is a term that's kind of rapidly evolving, and it's the requirements that you have to look at both environmental, social, but also the governance side of sustainability. So the S is that shared value. So this example I've got on the left-hand screen, as we are from Savills, I'm just looking at the real estate sector. But here you can see that there's the local authorities, there's the communities, and there's the real estate sector. But that could be any sector. Sometimes there might be a distrust between local authorities and communities, and there might be a distrust between real estate and the communities, but also there might be distrust, particularly if we think about real estate and local authorities. It's kind of a cycle of distrust here, but they all have one shared value, and that is supporting the local communities. So actually about the S, if you can deliver social value or communicate social value, working together to enhance the lives of the local area and the communities that are in it is of paramount importance. And this has to be done by supporting local needs, hence the project I've been coming here to deliver. But also things such as innovative ideas and strategies are really important to driving business plans and de-risking business opportunities, i.e. procurement. If you don't take social value seriously, you're at risk of losing those 15% of marks, which could be the decider for you winning a contract. And then just if I think about potentially from a real estate lens, another driver for doing S is about ensuring that exciting new community projects leave a lasting legacy. That's really important. There are many reasons why it matters that I've already kind of listed, but the main ones that come up is it creates a legacy, it improves the image and community perception, creates a sense of pride and belonging for employees, but also it's people-centric and educates clients and other stakeholders about what is possible. So just a little bit of a history lesson of the evolution of social value and where it actually came from. So CSR was the original term. So CSR stands for corporate social responsibility. So this was very much looking at that idea of going above profit and what is an organisation doing. But CSR tends to be internal within an organisation. So that actually started in the 1950s. ESG, the environmental social governance, this came around 2004. And then if we look at social value in particular, 2012 was the first piece of legislation that came out. So that was called the Social Value Act. So the Social Value Act meant that public sector organisations had to have regard to environmental, social and economic value when they are delivering contracts. So i.e. when they go out to get suppliers, they have to start considering those things. Local government really ran with this. However, central government were quite slow to adopt it. So Social Value Act is the driver for why Salford City Council started doing social value or even embedding it in their procurements like they have. Then if we go down to next legislation, UN SDGs came out, so the Sustainable Development Goals came out in 2015. So these are 17 goals of which the United Nations all agreed and signed up to about trying to support and create a sustainable future by 2030. Rapid that's quickly coming around, but that was existing, and that's something that is a driving force for organisations. But also as a VCSE, you might want to have a look at the SDGs to see what ones you align to, what ambitions are you supporting. And then if we're going down to more legislation, as I kind of mentioned earlier, central government are a bit slow to the party when it comes to social value. So in 2020, something called the PPN, which stands for Public Procurement Notice, came out called 0620. They all have different referencing, came out in June 2020. But essentially, the social value model is a guide and a way of which public sector central government body, so say Ministry of Justice, the NHS, or even things such as kind of central government organisations, in-scope organisations we call them, they have to have a 10% social value weighting. So they have to have a minimum of 10%. And they have to align with the model and report back up to the Cabinet Office on a quarterly basis. So that really put the emphasis for central government on a consistent approach and a consistent minimum weighting, but also consistency in reporting up to Cabinet Office. And then there were some things in that, because it came out in 2020, there was a whole theme in the model for COVID, which is no longer relevant, but also they've had some lessons learned. So just in 2025, as this new Procurement Act came out, they also released an updated social value model. So just moving on again, just briefly for legislation, just to compare the different areas of the United Kingdom or the different countries. So you've got the Public Services Act, Social Value Act that came out in 2012 for the UK. Then in 2015, Wales released the Future Generations Wellbeing Act, which essentially looks at economic, social, cultural, and also environmental. And then we've got the PPN 0620 that came out in 2020, the central government model. And then in 2021, we have the Community Wealth Building, which is the Scottish equivalent. So if you are ever looking to do work in Wales, it's all about kind of well-being is the term that's being used for sustainable development. And then in rather than social value, and in Scotland, they use the term community wealth building as opposed to social value. So just looking at an organisational social value maturity. So I kind of touched upon this really briefly earlier, but if we think about social value at Salford City Council and authorities, they really are an innovator. So a beginner is essentially someone who's starting to learn the importance of social value. Then it moves on to acceptance, so from a nice to have to a must have as an organisation. Then it moves on to quantifying and measuring, but also communicating that externally. So really getting an understanding of what it is. And then finally moving on to that governance and regulation and really pushing that out. So we can see here actually Salford City Council are an innovator because they were one of the first to do the planning side of things, and they have quite strict governance and regulations. City Mayor has responsibilities for that. But if we look at private sector organisations, you can also see that you might be mature in some things, but also you might be still on a journey for others. So for us here at Savills, we used to actually measure and quantify social value with a measurement framework. However, actually we're realigning our goals and we're looking at actually what is the impact we can deliver, and is there more qualitative side we can deliver. So it might seem that actually we're taking a step back, but actually if you look at the sector, that's quite an innovative, forward-thinking approach. So it's a movement. Social value is continuously evolving. I used to work at Social Value Portal. When I joined there was 30. When I left, there was 130. It is a rapidly evolving sector and industry. I've seen roles that are now popping up in local authorities, housing associations, contractors. It is really rapidly evolving. It becomes a movement. So all I'm going to say is, if you're at the start of your journey right now and you're thinking, what is social value? Do not worry. Everyone goes through this, and it is a journey, and a lot of people are here to support you. But as VCSEs, you already have a really good understanding of the communities. It might just be about how you communicate that. Pardon me. So I'm just going to skip over the challenges, but essentially when you get the slides, you'll be able to see these. But there are some challenges, both regionally and nationally. These come down to things such as measurement, especially as VCSEs, you might see this of what we talked through today, but measurement frameworks might not be able to use to communicate the impact and deliver, which is sometimes quite frustrating. Evolving needs, being able to adapt and really ensure that you're in tune with the evolving local needs. And then communication, actually about how do we learn and share the positive impacts. Also, how do we share the lessons learned that we've had? How do you ensure that you avoid overclaiming and social value washing? So just to make it explicitly clear, what overclaiming is claiming social value that might be, say, false claims, so either claiming a wider impact that's been delivered, or also another term of it could be overclaiming, i.e. claiming something that's happened as a result of what you've done, but not directly because of your organisation. So there are things to be watched out for, which I'll come on to in more detail later. So to get into the devil of the detail about what is social value measurement, so I'm going to break down this first bullet point. So social value measurement aims to quantify the impact delivered to communities through additionality initiatives. You're aware that's a lot to break down, so I'm going to break it down into different things. So social value measurement aims to quantify impact. So when we say quantify, we don't mean that we essentially want to put a pound and pence value on it. That's what social value measurement does for you. It enables you to put a pound and pence figure on things. However, when we look at quantifying impact, sometimes people will see reports, and we'll talk through some numbers in a minute, but some people might get daunted by the point of, does that mean that if I come out with a figure of £85,000, do I have to pay £85,000? No, it's quantifying the impact. It could be 85 apples for all that matters, but essentially we use the pound and pence value because that's what is fiscal representation. Delivered to communities is obviously self-explanatory, ensuring that the social value is delivered to local communities. And then through additionality initiatives. So what I'm talking about here through additionality initiatives is anything above and beyond a core contractual requirement. So especially when we're looking at social value measurement and targets as part of the bidding process, sometimes people might get a little bit confused about, well, I'm already delivering social value, especially as a charity. It's a fine line because the service you're doing is inherently social impact. So sometimes it's hard to differentiate, but what is really important when it comes to social value measurement is that you are going above and beyond a core contractual requirement. And I'm going to take you through an example today that hopefully will explain that additionality piece in more information. But essentially, if it's written down anywhere in your core contract, that cannot be claimed as social value. Anything above and beyond that can be. So there's a couple of ways of measuring social value, but the framework that we're going to be looking at today, they look at input, output, impact, outcome. Not going to go into too many detail. If you want to learn more about it, you can have a Google and have a read. However, just a high level summarize, input output is essentially looking at your organization. What are you doing? The tangible things. Whereas impact and outcomes are essentially looking at what has happened as a result of that. So this is sometimes where it's harder to put a financial proxy on things, especially if we're looking at a standardized framework, because essentially if we say about hiring an individual or potentially providing a crime initiative, if you deliver, say, a crime safety initiative, if you deliver it in an area where there's limited crime, that might have a lower impact. However, if you deliver it in an area of high deprivation and high crime, that will have a greater impact. However, your inputs and outputs might be exactly the same. So that's what some of the things. And this is where it comes down to the next bullet point in terms of lack of consistency with existing frameworks. So there are multiple different frameworks. If you type in social value measurement to Google, they will come up with at least 6 or 7 different measurement organizations or frameworks or tools or methodologies or platforms straight away. It can be quite overwhelming. But currently, they do not provide, there's no one set thing that provides 100% assurance, transparency, or comparability. And that is essentially because no two communities are the same. And we can't be comparing apples to pears in this situation. So that's why it's just sometimes social value measurement can be quite overwhelming. And unless you're going to a situation where you have to, i.e. for procurement, I would recommend it for anyone at the beginner start of their social value journey. We always say about getting your ducks in a row first and being able to learn how to communicate that in terms of standard KPIs, but more importantly, qualitative side of things. So impact stories, case studies, they are the important things to start on the journey. The measurement can always be, the pounds and pence can always be retrospectively added as long as you've got that in place. Some key terms just to be aware of is additionality, as I say, above and beyond anything core contractual requirements. Attribution. Attribution is really important, especially to avoid overclaiming. So attribution means that you can only claim as an organisation what you are doing. So it's really important sometimes when it comes down to it is that some organisations might have supply chains, for instance. I cannot be claiming my supply chain social value as myself. I can say that this is our overall that's been delivered or unlocked through this project or this site, but I can't be saying I did that because I did not do that. Another good example in attribution is claiming my own staff's time. So if I say I volunteer, so if I volunteer during staff hours, if I volunteer throughout the day and Savills enable me to go do that, Savills would be able to claim those volunteering hours because it's during the working time. However, 2 weekends ago, I volunteered at a half marathon race to support cancer research. I did that on my own Sunday. So that social value, those hours I spent volunteering, Savills cannot claim that because that was in my own personal time and I didn't take the time back from work. So sometimes that's another grey area of attribution. So you can only be claiming what technically you as an organisation are directly having influence over. Dead weight is important to just know that dead weight is something that means what would have happened anyway without this. So is this initiative, is this would have happened anyway? The reason I say dead weight is some of the proxy values come up quite high, but it's important to understand that dead weight has been considered in a lot of proxy values already. So you don't need to be thinking about, oh, I think that figure's too high, I need to lower it. You do not need to worry about that. The proxy values are calculated in standard. And then finally, financial proxies. This is essentially saying that they will come out with a pounds and pence figure, but it doesn't mean this is what you as a charity or you as an organisation have to invest in. This is the pound equivalent of either the input, output, impact, or outcome. So that's just really important to kind of summarise. The thing I will always iterate, and I'll say it probably about 5 or 6 times again throughout this presentation, is it's important to recognise that the impact of qualitative measurement data is not alone. So I don't just give us numbers. Numbers is just one side of the story, and the council really do want to see the impact. They want to hear the stories. They want to see the pictures. They want to know about the human Salford lives that have been impacted through the work. That's always important to remember. And if we're thinking about bidding, sometimes it's a 50-50 split. So the numbers are only 7.5%. So to touch upon what is Social Value Portal and what are the national tops. So Social Value Portal, you will see it in your instructions to tender. So in the guide instructions for bidding for a piece of work. work. So Social Value Portal is a SaaS organisation. So SaaS stands for Software as a Service. So that is technically a platform, is a platform, which I'll kind of show you in a bit. But essentially, they are a supplier to the council and they support with that 15%. So essentially, this is the tool that you will go on to submit the 15% social value weighting of your bid. They are, this is where it gets a little bit confusing, but the Social Value Portal, they are the owners and the masters, and they host on their portal the National TOMs. The National TOMs is the framework. So that is the measurement framework that is their IP, and that sits on Social Value Portal. So when you log onto Social Value Portal, they're the people that are supporting with the kind of contract management side of things, but the TOM system is the framework that you use on that. They aren't two separate organisations. The National TOMs is essentially the IP, the measurement that sits on Social Value Portal. So when it comes to submitting a bid, read the instructions outlined in the invitation to tender. So as I said earlier, that 15% you'll tend to see will tend to be a 50-50 split. So that means 50% will be the number, the pounds and pence that comes out of your targets, and 50%, 7.5% of the weighting overall for the whole tender will be on the qualitative. So that's you explaining how are you going to deliver social value, what are you going to deliver social value, and can you provide the council with the confidence that you will be delivering that. So in the ITT, you'll get access to Social Value Portal. There'll be a link in there. Register as soon as you get that link. And I'll show you Social Value Portal in a minute why, but it will essentially give you access to loads of different help, loads of different resources, but also the measurement framework so you can start planning about everything. Once you've submitted everything on SVP, make sure that you can export data. So there's a little screenshot at the bottom here. You'll see that there's an export data button. That's what you need to look for. Once you've downloaded that, you can submit that as part of the rest of the bid for the council. And there is an own support help service and everything provided by Social Value Portal as a supplier for Salford City Council that you'll be able to get access to. So as I said, Social Value Portal are hosted at the TOMs. So what are the TOMs? So the TOMs stand for themes, outcomes, and measures. So there are 5 different themes that sit within it, but I've got a couple of examples here of some measures. So if we look at theme 1 here, which is jobs, and the idea is about promoting local skills and employment, i.e. Salford skills and employment. An outcome could be more local people into employment. And the measure that you could look at here is NT1. So NT stands for National TOM. So it's like essentially a referencing system, a labelling system. You'll also see for Salford, they have also another label next to it called SCC, and then a number. That simply stands for Salford City Council. So do not get confused. There's not 2 measures you need to be doing. You can either look for the National TOM reference or the SCC reference. So NT1 is number of full-time equivalent direct local employees hired or retained on the contract. So what that means is how many Salford-based staff do you have working on the contract? Hired or retained, so they can already be working for your organisation, or you could potentially be hiring someone new to work on the contract. So I would put in this measure the amount of Salford staff that work on the contract. And then if I'm looking at the other theme, which is about building a vibrant community, we've got more opportunities for local MSMEs and VCSEs, so medium, small micro enterprises and voluntary community social enterprises. NT15 to the National TOM 15, the measure is about provision of expert business advice to VCSEs and MSMEs. So this is actually what I'm delivering right now. This is my social value. This is me providing expert volunteering hours to yourselves as VCSEs to upskill on what social value is. So as I mentioned, there are 5 themes. These themes are going to be changing very briefly in the future, and there's a brand new National TOMs that are getting released. But just to summarise what the themes are, because they're still broadly similar. Jobs, so supporting local economic skills and employment. Growth, that's all about supporting the local economy. Social, healthier, safer and more resilient communities. Environment, decarbonising and safeguarding our world. And innovation, promoting social innovation. The reason I always bring up innovation is essentially a catch-all measures. So if you don't have, it's essentially four measures, one of jobs, one of growth, one of social, one environment. And it essentially means that when you look down the national TOMS list, if you want to deliver an additionality social value initiative that you cannot find, that's your measure. They are essentially broad open for you to be able to say what you're delivering, which especially as VCSE, sometimes you're delivering things that go above and beyond what you might see in a standard TOM. So that would be your measure. So I'm just going to take you through a brief example of what actually you can commit to when it comes to social value. So the example that we're looking at is I am going to compete for a bid and I've got a 2-year community arts contract is what I'm going for. So it's a 2-year contract and I'm delivering community arts. Say I've got a space, the council have provided a space within Salford Shopping Centre. We've got a shop space there in Pendleton, and I'm thinking about I'm offering essentially community spaces, or actually I'm going to host my own one where I've got spaces. So I'm just so what could I potentially do for social value in this example? So say actually I'm hosting it from my own hub. I've got my own space here. So actually I've got NT1. So NT1, SCC1. This is a member of full-time equivalent staff working on the contract. So I've actually know that I have got one full-time equivalent employee living in Salford who's working on the contract. I also know that actually I've got someone who only works 2.5 days a week working on the contract who are based in Salford. So I've technically got 1.5 FTE working on the contract. I also know that actually, as part of this commission, I am going to be providing some refreshments, and I'm actually going to go through a social enterprise. So I'm going to go with Half the Biscuit that they help get people into employment through their bakering services. I'm actually going to spend £2,000 each year with them. They are a social enterprise, so I'm going to commit to that, which is NT14 or SCC4. I'm also going to commit to 12 hours per annum of doing college visits. So I'm actually going to go in and talk about community arts, and we'll talk about different careers in arts, or I'm going to go do a wellbeing session with schools about arts. I'm also going to offer extra 4 hours of the contract. So the contract for me is that I've got to deliver community arts of X amount in a year. I know that actually I'm going to deliver per hour an extra 4. So say they're quarterly sessions, I'm going to extend the hours on each session. So I'm going to do 1 extra hour of community art. So essentially I need to hire the room for an extra hour, which will cost me £50 per hour. And I also need a staff member to run that. So that's going to be an extra 4 hours per annum. So if we look at that, I've got the local employees. They already work for me as an organisation. They're just going to be working specifically on this contract. The refreshments, I'm going to be able to ensure that I'm providing those from a social enterprise. So it might be that it's part of the contractual requirement to provide refreshments, but it doesn't say anything about where they have to come from. So as additionality, I'm making sure that they come from a social enterprise. On top of that, we're going to do 12 hours a year between us. We're going to go into school college visits. Well, we're actually going to spend 10 hours, but we'll spend 2 hours prepping it. And then, as I say, we're going to do 1 additional hour of community arts each year, each quarter of the contract. So remembering it's a 2-year contract, actually the social value that comes out of that through the National TOMS framework is £85,232.76. So hopefully through understanding those initiatives, that is obviously a significant contribution. However, it's not actually, if you're thinking about the pounds and pence invested by your organisation compared to the social value that's produced on it, is actually very incomparable. So let's actually look about how has that number been generated. So if I look at the first measure, NT1 or SCC1, so that number of local full-time people working on the contract. This column here shows me the unit. So the units is full-time equivalent. So I worked out that for the 2-year contract, I've got a 3 FTE because I've got 1 person full-time and 1 person part-time for the 2 years. So that's 1 plus 0.5 times by 2. The proxy value for that So for one full-time equivalent for a year is 28,000. So the 1 times 3 takes me to £84,000. And this is why I always encourage, especially local organisations and local charities, because a lot of the time you tend to have local staff, really ensuring that you utilise this measure, because sometimes it can be quite daunting because it has such a high proxy value. However, in terms of demonstrating your local economic benefit, it's a really meaningful measure. NT14, which is SCC4, is pounds spent. So we're looking here at the pounds spent with VCSEs. You said £2,000 per annum. So the £2,000 per annum equates to 4,000. You can see here, actually, the proxy value is only 12p per pound spent. And the reason for this is it's not saying that that's the value of working out specifically with that specific social enterprise. It's just a standard measure that makes you look at actually what is the economic benefit or the social benefit. So that would equate to £48. However, despite the investment being £4,000, the reason I wanted to put that measure in there is just to make you realise that sometimes you might feel like you've put in the number, but it doesn't always come out in the pounds and pence value of that fiscal value representation. NT8, or which is SCC19, which is the school visits. I can see here I want to do 12 hours, staff hours per year. So that's 24 hours for the 2-year contract. The proxy value for that in the portal is £16.93p. So this comes out to £406.32. And then if I'm looking at the extra, say, extra 1 hour of the session, I have to say both the time and both the resource, i.e. the room. So the room would be £50 per hour per annum per hour, of which you've got 4 per year. So that equates to 400, which is just £1 a pence. That's an input measure. So that's just what am I inputting? That's come out with the direct sound, the same input. And then the hours I've spent on that is actually 8 hours, 4 hours per year. This then comes to £135.44. So this is actually how, by communicating my local employment, thinking about spending with a local VCS, well, with a VCSE, doing some staff engagement in schools, and then allowing or offering 1 extra hour per quarter of my service, I've created a social value proxy value of £85,232.76p. So this is my point, to demonstrate that there's a really good way that you can demonstrate the social value that you can deliver, but you don't have to be promising the world when it comes down to it. I don't want it to be seen as a barrier. It's just about thinking about this. But this £85,000, this would only be 1/2 of the social value submission. The other half is actually how do you deliver it, which is more important. So I'm just, and then I'm going to show you the portal quickly. So things to note: no measures, unless they're stated, are mandatory. So that's really important to note. So do not feel overwhelmed. There are lots of measures in there. You do not have to commit to everything. Do not double count. So do not claim if you're doing one initiative, do not claim it in 4 different measures. Only commit to additionality, i.e. above and beyond the contract. Especially as I recommend always looking at that local employment one, always calculate that FTE correctly, which I'll show you in the portal in a minute. And then read the target guidance. So I'm about to show you where you can see this guidance, but always make sure you're reading the guidance to be able to ensure that you're attributing your claiming correctly. So just moving us on quickly. So I'm just going to show you the social value portal. So this is actually our portal from what I've been delivering for social value for the council. So I can see here that actually I'm 35% delivery. So for my contract, I've committed to £8,160 worth of social value. So always to say, you don't have to be committing the world for everything. Quality over quantity is key when it comes down to social value. So I'm just going to show you some measures. So I'm not going to talk you through the whole portal because you'll have access to be able to, once you have got registered for account, you can access to free bidders sessions, but also I'll show you in a minute on Self-Assist Council where you can access a video that takes you through all this. So I'm not going to take you through that, but what I am going to show you is just how an understanding of how it works. So I'm just going to click on to log here. So I'm just thinking here, this NT1 or SCC1, so this is, I say, the number of local direct employees. So I'm just going to click on full guidance, and this is going to give me everything that I need to know. So it's telling me local here is within the geographical boundary of Salford. And it's telling me what the measure is. It's giving me a definition of everything, but it's telling me right now, because I'm in delivery, because I'm in contract management, but if you were bidding for a piece of work, this would say target guidance. It will tell you what the targets are. This is telling me exactly what I need to input. So the duration of employment, the employment status, the FTE equivalent, and the first half of their postcode. So for this example, I'm going to say I'm logging for just the whole entire contract, but I'm got full-time employee, I've got one employee, and they're going to work for 2 years on the contract. I'm going to change this to years. And that is automatically calculating it. And then I'm just going to put in here general manager, and then I'm going to put the first I can't even get my words out. First half the postcode you can input into that. Essentially, once I click save, what that automatically does for me is it then calculates that FTE, it times it by the proxy value and gives me that value. So you don't need to sit here and manually do the maths of what a social value is. It will automatically do it for you. So now when I'm thinking about this one, I can then do one, or I can do a part-time employee, and they're actually going to work how many months? We can just do here, say that she'll work 6 months, or actually in total with a part-time, they work all this stuff. So you can work out what exactly it is, or I can click full-time and I want employee, and I know that they're actually going to work 1 year rather than the whole 2 years. I can then calculate that, click save, and it all does it for me. So as I say, this is what the social value portal, so this is the portal, but here, these are the TOMs. So sometimes it just gets a little bit confusing, but always to think about it. There are lots of different measures. You can see here, lots of different measures available for you to be able to come in and select. But what you can essentially do is you can do that. You can type keywords. So if I want to type in something like, neat, see what comes up. We can see what measures there are for neats. Or if I work, say, on kind of well-being, see what well-being measures come up as well. So there's lots of different ways. And the only other thing I just want to show you here is download Tom's guidance. This is why I always say get access as soon as you can, as soon as you see the ITT documentation, because you can access this document. I mean, it's a 30-page download, but essentially gives you everything. So it's going to give you what the theme is, it's going to give you the measure, and it's giving you everything you need. So it's giving you the definition of it, any help text, the target requirements. So if I was to bid right now, and I put NT1, i.e. local employment I bid, it would say I have to summarise my strategy, but also it says I have to provide what am I going to do. I would also recommend looking at the evidence required, because if I have this information, you could already provide that, and that would demonstrate how you're going above and beyond, and you've already got that expertise and the confidence that you'll be able to deliver the social value. And then it also gives you guidance as available. So there's lots of different support available for you. And then just one other thing I'll show you on here is there's a help centre. So once you do have access, and I always recommend doing it as quickly as you can, as you can see here right now, there is a bidder for webinars. So it's a video and book your place on for being able to learn how to use social value. There's also top tips. And then also if you're doing, say, your first ever submission, 8 helpful tips for your submission, or also how to give a good qualitative submission. So you're not alone when it comes down to it. There is support and help. And then also, if I've just come on, this is the Salford City Council website, there's lots of different advice available for me. So I can have a look into the council policies, I can look into the 10% Better campaign, but also there's lots of downloads of which I can see, say, previous impact reports, and I can see all the different tips that are available. And then also, if you go on to the kind of their how to tender for business part, which hopefully you'll be looking at anyway if you're looking to bid for the council, you'll be able to see there's a whole section here about social value on it, talking about the TOMs. So there are 78 available there in total, and you can register for a monthly session as well. So that's even prior to getting your ITT documentation. You can already click on that and get further support, which will go above and beyond into the portal and the TOMs. So just to kind of finish up before we stop the recording, we go on to questions. But what can your organisation do to stand out? And this, I guess, is particularly thinking about that qualitative side of things. So you've got the quantitative, you've got the numbers, you've inputted it, but that target guidance, that method statement, if required, what can you do to stand out? So answer the specific social value question. So answer the target guidance, provide that information, but always make sure, especially if you're providing a method statement or any accompanying documents. Sometimes as VCSEs, you have so much great work and so much great evidence to share of previous delivery. However, sometimes you take up the word count by demonstrating what you've already done, rather than utilising the word count or showing what you're going to do. So always two key words to remember are relevancy and proportionality. So always answering that specific question, but also remembering, is your answer relevant and proportionate? So you need to provide the council with a confidence that you're going to deliver it, but also you have the confidence that you're delivering additionality on the contract, and that's really key. Using words such as additionality, above and beyond the contractor requirements, even just putting a statement in saying, I confirm or we acknowledge that this is above and beyond our core contractual requirements, is really key. Also, sometimes for charities, or VCSEs, the pitfall that they fall into sometimes is by saying this is above and beyond the core contractual requirements, but we already do this as an organisation. If you already do it, you can't be claiming that as social value for this specific contract because it's not additionality. So if you're already doing a service and you're not doing anything different, you can't be claiming that. Otherwise, that is just claiming what you're doing as an organisation. Ensure that project teams understand they're accountable, and even putting who is point of accountability, who's accountable for each measure or overall for social value within your organisation for this specific contract is a really good way of demonstrating that and makes an organisation stand out. Responding to local needs. So if you have selected a measure based on need, and you might want to do a quick Google, or the work that I have done will be published by Salford City Council on their website, hopefully within the next month or so. That has got a local needs analysis online already. So you will be able to find Salford needs, i.e. the data to back it up. But hopefully, as VCSEs already on the ground in the communities, you will hopefully already have quotes, you already have feedback, you'll already have impact statements of which you can share insights from to really demonstrate how you're responding to local needs. Asking clarification questions if you're confused or if you're apprehensive about social value right from the start. You can ask clarification questions throughout the procurement process, but also, as I've showed you, there are links and resources available prior to even getting to that stage. And embed social value into the contract, especially as a VCSE, you naturally are going to be delivering more impact anyway through them partnering with you. So make sure that you address that within any other sections, so maybe the quality section of the bid, just to really ensure that actually social value isn't just always that additionality. You as an organisation align with the Salford City Council or values and principles. Just to really summarise quickly, if you're thinking about what social value you can deliver before you even look at the TOMs, an easy way to bucket into is financial and non-financial contributions. So financials, i.e. do we have a pot of money that we can distribute? If so, how are we going to distribute in the best way? But I'm well aware that for VCSEs, the money sometimes is already tight. So giving out money is not what you need to be doing. And that's not all that social value is, because sometimes it might be perceived as that. But actually volunteering, so that could be both using standard volunteering or your expert volunteering hours. And then in-kind contributions. So is it about donating resources? Is it about donating time? Is it about allowing people into spaces? Is it about actually offering extra services or facilities that are going above and beyond an in-kind contribution? And then the one thing I will say is, from the side of someone who's evaluated hundreds of bids, is the best social value response are where an organisation is genuinely attempting to support local needs. So evaluators are hoping to read a submission that provides them with confidence that bidder is truly going to commit to additional value within their local area that is relevant and proportionate to the contract. As I say, when I was being evaluated, I was not looking to catch people out. Same with procurement, they're not ever looking to catch anyone out. They just want to ensure that they're investing with a supplier who's going to maximise the value and support the communities the best. And then just one last slide, just as always kind of a thing to think about, social washing, as I mentioned earlier, but it's a business or organisation when it makes misleading claims about social responsibility of its products or services to position itself in a better light for economic gains and public image. So just really be careful about that. Do not be making over claims. Do not be saying that you're going to be changing the world. Only say what's relevant and proportionate, and only deliver what's relevant and proportionate, and communicate that. So just finally, what can you do to stand out? You're a local organisation, so be clear, be sure to include the correct FTE, i.e. that NT1, full-time equivalent, working on the contract measure, and provide evidence that you understand the local need. So include some data or include some quotes that you've collected through your work of what the local needs are and what you're responding to them. Make sure that any targets inputted provide all information needed that's stated within that target guidance I showed you. Always make clear how you're going to deliver the social value. So some questions to think about is who will be responsible, what's the timeline for delivering it, and why can the council have confidence that you will deliver this? And then my final thing to say is remember, numbers are only part of the bid. Your qualitative bid is more, if anything, more important. It's your time to shine as a VCSE. You already are making an incredible impact. This is just your time to be able to communicate it, work out that additionality, and deliver that additionality to really support the council with their aims and ambitions of what they're trying to achieve, of essentially supporting a healthier, greener, and more inclusive city. So that is the presentation. I hope you found that useful. It might be worth if Natalie, if you want to kind of stop the recording now so that we've got that, and then we can move on if anyone has any questions.